Now, U.S. lawmakers have voted to reject a standalone Israel aid bill denounced by critics as a cynical bid to thwart a cross-party border security and foreign assistance package that would include cash for war-torn Ukraine. Republicans in the House of Representatives scheduled the vote after the Democratic-led Senate released a bipartisan bill on Sunday pairing billions of dollars for Israel and Ukraine with some of the strictest immigration curbs in decades. But support for that $118 billion package has dwindled, with Donald Trump, who's running for his second White House term, pressuring Republicans to avoid handing President Joe Biden a legislative victory ahead of November's election. The standalone Israel bill would have provided $17.6 billion in military aid for the country, which is strongly supported by the vast majority of lawmakers in both parties as it responds to the deadly October 7 attacks by Hamas militants. Well, for more on this, Arise special correspondent Karl Bostic joins me now live from Tel Aviv. Karl, good to see you, and thanks as always. Well, there seemed to be some kind of move towards having some peace, perhaps before the Muslim month of Ramadan. Let us in on the details, specifically what Hamas is also proposing.
Well, that's right. I mean, today marks the 4-month anniversary. It's hard to call it an anniversary since October 7th massacre here in Israel. So it's a very subdued, somber feeling here. Nonetheless, you have Secretary of State Anthony Blinken from the U.S. He's coming to Israel after having visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt about the terms of a deal to not only end the war, or at least a ceasefire, to win the release of the hostages, but to talk about, the day after the war. And that's why he came out to bring a message from these key Arab countries, to bring that message to Prime Minister Netanyahu. The problem is that even though Hamas has responded, which has been received positively, it just shows how far the two sides are apart. I mean, Hamas is, demanding that there be 3 stages of 45 days each. First stage, beginning with release of all civilian hostages and women, children, elderly, sick, in exchange for all women and children Palestinian prisoners. Keep in mind there are about 8,000 to 9,000 prisoners, 1,500 of whom have convictions against Israelis. So there's a lot of details to be worked out right now. But I think what's important to keep in mind is this. Israel does not want to go back to October 6th, the day before October 7th. Hamas wants to end the war with guarantees. They want them to withdraw their troops with international guarantees. Israel will not accept it. In fact, they're saying they will expand their operations to the southern part of Gaza, in Rafah, which is right next to the Egyptian border, where a town of 200,000, that's Rafah, has now grown in size 5 to more than 1.2 million. That's about half the population of Gaza. Egypt is very nervous. They don't want Israel to force the opening of the Rafah crossing for Gazans to flood into Egypt. And yet, that's where the tunnels are still, and Israel wants control of it. So it's like really question. Either you release all the hostages or you continue fighting. There's no in between. And even though we have this official number of 136 hostages, it's now being reported that at least a fifth of them are already dead, 31 at least. And maybe another 20 are dead. So that's 50 right there. So not to mention the conditions that those 1.3 million are living in. Conditions of no shelter during winter, half facing starvation, just incredibly horrid scenes reading about, families. They actually are taking animal feed, grinding it into flour to eat because they have no subsistence. So I think what's new is that Anthony Blinken wants Israel to think about the day after. The problem is the day after also includes recognition of a Palestinian state. Saudi Arabia is saying that we're willing to normalize relations with Israel, but only when there is a plan for a Palestinian state.
Well, Karl, another issue has to do with faraway United States, where lawmakers have voted to reject a standalone Israel aid bill. Let us in on what this would mean in that operation there.
Well, phase one would mean, again, working from a number of about 130 hostages, maybe, who knows, 30, 50 are already, and you have a situation where Hamas is saying that you have to release all women, children, sick prisoners. Israel will not, for example, agree to the release of about 560 prisoners who have murder convictions. Israelis. They would not agree to the release of about 130 militants, Hamas fighters, who were captured in Israel on October 7th, who participated in the massacre. And yet those are the kinds of people that Hamas wants to have released or freed. So there's that. And then what's the second phase, which would be another 45 days, they want Gazans to be able to move freely about Gaza. They want them to be able to go back home, even though 60% of the structures are demolished, damaged, or destroyed. They want them to be able to travel abroad for medical treatment, and they also want shelters to be rebuilt. It's a way of saying that Hamas wants to show that it's still in control of the running of Gaza. And Israel is basically saying, among other things, no, we're not pulling out our troops. We're going to continue to fight, and we want to make sure Hamas no longer has a future in the governing of Gaza. That's what we're up against right now. And it's hard to see just navigate that difference.
Well, Karl, Bostic, many thanks for your time as always. You stay safe.